Good to have you with us once again. Thank you for being on Stand With Us TV. Deadly attacks on Israel's north, leaving kids and teens murdered. So what does Israel need to effectively do to stave off these Iranian-backed Hezbollah attacks?
Yeah, it's a sad day, another sad day in Israel. And really, if you want my honest answer, the big answer to your question, it isn't local. It's not about what the IDF will now retaliate or has already retaliated against Hezbollah for killing more than 10 Israeli civilians or 10 civilians in Israel. I think that if we want to really answer that question, then the answer is about 1,200 miles away from Israel. That's Iran. And we can continue to stay in this, what seems to be perpetual cycle of terror and attacks and violence against Israelis, whether it is from the south, Gaza, or from the north, Hezbollah, or from the far southeast, from the Houthis, doesn't matter. The common denominator here and the address of the sender is one and the same, and that is Tehran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And as long as we don't deal with them and change the equation and force the Iranians to change their strategy, their murderous, belligerent strategy against Israel, then I don't think that we will see substantial change when it comes to either of Iran's proxies, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Houthis, or the others. On the tactical level, I think that the IDF now must retaliate strongly against Hezbollah, and we'll see the scope and severity, the distance from Israel, and how hurtful these attacks now, this retaliation will be against Hezbollah. But bottom line, we're in a cycle of violence that serves Iranian purposes, doesn't serve Israeli purposes, and unfortunately, Israeli civilians are paying a price for it.
And it also bolsters Hamas, doesn't it? You can imagine that the Hamas leader is very pleased with these recent Hezbollah attacks. Take us through what a potential all-out war with Hezbollah would look like, because there are some very worrying estimates, and clearly Israel has to some extent been trying to avoid that until now. Could Israel deal with a real all-out multi-front war?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, Israel could deal. The longer answer is that Israel would rather not. And you are very correct in speaking about horrible consequences. And I think that most people, even those living in Israel, who have endured almost 10 months of war now in the south and in the north, even they cannot really imagine the scope of an all-out war with Hezbollah, especially not the first week or so, when Hezbollah would be at peak fighting power and firing about 4,500 rockets and missiles all over Israel, and where there would be hundreds of Israeli casualties every day. It's important that people understand that when we speak about a war with Iran's biggest and most powerful proxy, we're talking about stakes that are much higher and a potential threat to the very core of the state of Israel, and where the collateral damage, where the amount of Israelis killed will be unlike anything that we've seen before, and where the amount of damage and catastrophe in Lebanon will be something that will make Gaza look like just a warm-up for the real event. And that is, without being jokeful about it, it is a catastrophe or a war of orders of magnitude much larger. That is the reason why the IDF so far has not decided to go beyond and escalate the situation, despite the fact that Israel has been under attack from Hezbollah basically since the 8th of October.
And so we saw Prime Minister Netanyahu telling Congress this week, give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster. He also made the case that our fight is your fight. You're in the US right now. Do you think that message was taken on board?
You know, it was an impressive oratory performance, but I think that it would have been in Israeli interest to go faster ourselves without talking about American support and bombs. And I think that what we have been doing in Gaza for the last almost 10 months is unfortunately giving Hamas too many breathers and too many options to stay alive. and with our 115 remaining hostages in mind, I think that the pressure should be far heavier and brutal on Hamas, on their operatives, on their leadership, on their infrastructure, and to force them into submission and to agree with our terms, to defeat Hamas. And sadly, I don't think that we have applied enough continuous pressure on Hamas, and I hope that will change. Currently now there are additional IDF divisions moving into Gaza, Khan Yunis, and another one in the central part of the Gaza Strip, and additional troops along the Rafah corridor. So there's more troops now. But at the end of the day, the war goes on. It is protracted. And it's a nice talking point to speak about others. But I think that first and foremost, Israel should be applying pressure on our enemies to make the optimal conditions to get our people back, and of course to obtain security and freedom for Israelis by defeating Hamas.
Meanwhile, of course, disgusting scenes outside of Congress with the Freedom Bell defaced, pro-Hamas graffiti over the Capitol, American flags burnt. What are we to make of this?
Well, I think Americans, I mean, what Israelis and Jews make of it, it's nothing new. These are thugs, these are terror supporters, genocide supporters, Israel haters and American haters. And it's unfortunately, sadly, nothing new. But what from Israeli and Jewish perspectives, and I've been speaking with Jewish communities all over North America and in Europe, and they've seen this level of violence, they've seen the hatred, and they've seen the support and the genocidal calls. And now it was just on live US TV for everybody to see. It was out in the open, but I think sadly nothing new. What I think Americans, non-Jewish Americans, should make of this is, please understand what it is that the Jews are facing, and please understand that this isn't only about the Jews. This isn't about Israel. This is about hating and despising the very underlying values of Western society, of law and order, of democracy, of civil rights, of liberties, of freedom, freedom of religion and expression. These people who espouse terrorist ideologies, who chant genocidal slogans, who are on the side of Hamas and Iran, are people who, as they clearly demonstrated and showed, have nothing but contempt for America, for its values, and for democracy and for freedom. When you burn an American flag in the American Capitol, it is perhaps the ultimate thing to do when you want to show that you hate America, the very same country that they live in. And what I was amazed by was, yes, I was happy to see that there were strong words by American politicians against this display of vile anti-American hatred. But what I found strikingly missing from these statements, including by senior elected and appointed officials, was, we are going to hold these people accountable. Not only is it not okay to burn an American flag and to deface an American monument in the American Capitol, but these people will be held to justice, whether they are wearing masks or not wearing masks. And I think that's a sign of weakness. That is not what America needs. That is definitely not what American Jews need in order to be defended and safe in their home country, where they are loyal, law-abiding citizens, proud Americans, serving their country, paying their taxes, and respecting their institutions. And sadly, they are not getting the kind of defense and protection that they are entitled to.
Very well said. Let's talk about the IDF raids that were carried out, the strikes in Yemen, after the explosive UAV drone that was sent by the Houthis, hitting Tel Aviv, killing a 50-year-old man, Yevgeny Ferda, injuring several other people. Tell us your analysis of the attack, the Israeli response, and the message that it was sending.
Yeah, it's been quite a week. There's been so many things happening, and it seems almost distant history, this brazen Houthi attack. It was an attack that not the first, of course. They've fired more than 220 rockets and missiles towards Israel. This one unfortunately hit and caused a casualty, and therefore, perversely, only this one got a response from Israel. I was happy to see the Israeli response because it was a professional, targeted, and effective strike on a dual purpose facility. The port of Hodeidah is where the Iranian Revolutionary Guard offloads their weapons that they deliver to the Houthi-aligned terrorist organization, the Iranian-aligned terrorist organization, the Houthis. That is where they deliver their shore-to-coast, shore-to-sea missiles. That is where they deliver their drones. That is how they provide weapons to the Houthis. So it's very much infrastructure that supports the Houthis' military illicit activity, including when they're firing missiles at international shipping lanes and when they're abducting international vessels out in international waters. So I think it was a good strike. It was well executed by the IDF. I am puzzled at why so far the US and the UK, who are leading the task force, allegedly leading the task force against the Houthis, haven't found it within their abilities or capacity to do a similar thing, even though it's been 9 months. I commend the defensive efforts that the US has been doing, and they are tremendously important to keep Israel safe and to prevent a general escalation here, and as such, very commendable. But bottom line, I think that we should draw a straight line across the Arabian Peninsula between Hodeidah in Yemen and the area of Bandar Abbas in the Persian or Arabian Gulf on the other side of Saudi Arabia. Bandar Abbas is an important Iranian port. That is where they offload oil and petrochemical products to China and to Russia and to other countries that are collaborating in the sanctions evasion scheme that the Iranians have been doing successfully for years. And I think that there are many similarities between these two different locations. I hope that Israel will formulate a well-thought, well-rounded strategy that includes economic, political, diplomatic, and military steps, and that this too will be part of the tools that Israel will bring to the table in order to, again, and I go back to the beginning of our conversation, if Israel wants peace and quiet and to continue to be the miracle of the Middle East that Israel is, to nurture our little oasis in the desert, then Israel needs safety. And the thing standing between Israel and safety is Iran. And if we want Iran to be different, then I think we should make them feel the results of attacking Israel. And there's many ways to do that, including, but not directly and first thing to do, but including strikes similar to what Israel did in Hodeidah against one Iranian proxy.
Finally, obviously, the hostages at the top of our minds, as always. We saw this week the IDF recover the bodies of 5 hostages in a mission in Khan Yunis, Maya Golan, Oren Golden, Rabid Katz, Sergeant Brodsky, and Staff Sergeant Tomer Yaakov Achimas. What can you share with us about that mission?
I just saw a quick video of the IDF division commander, Brigadier General Dan Goldfuss, inside the same tunnel where he and his troops uncovered the bodies of those murdered Israelis from. I think it sent a very good message that a senior Israeli commander was there showing it to the world, and I hope that people will see it and pay attention to it, and I commend the troops for doing it. I think it was a very brave and successful action. Sadly, it brought home only dead Israelis, and it provides a certain amount of solace to the families that can now finally bury their loved ones and close the circle, the initial circle of grief. But of course, for 115 other families, that is not the situation. And I'm amazed by the amount of pressure that is applied on Israel, on the Israeli leadership, and the amount of infighting in Israel over the reported terms of an agreement and the daylight that exists between Israel and the US when it comes to negotiations. And I'm appalled by the fact that very little pressure is applied on Hamas, on their main supporters, Qatar, and on Iran, which enables all this. And it all seems as if the easiest and softest thing to strike and apply pressure on is the Israeli government, which finds itself in a very, very challenging situation. I think that at the end of the day, I hope that we will have positive news coming out of Rome, where there's supposed to be a summit attended by the head of the Mossad, CIA, Shabak, and US officials and Qatari officials. I hope that for once we will have positive news from there for the sake of the families and the entire Jewish people. I remain pessimistic because we've been in similar situations long before, and I can just reiterate that I believe that we have to continue to apply strong, relentless pressure on Hamas, much more than what we're doing now and have been doing in the last months, in order to force them into recognizing that there is no other way out, no other way to stop the fighting and pressure than to hand over the hostages and to surrender.
Well, let's leave it there, and let's hope that next time we speak, we'll have more positive news to discuss. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, safe travels, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Michael.